Imagine this being inside our unconscious, it's just as a story to kind of conceptualize it, not a scientific model. But I imagine this being sitting in our unconscious called desire, and it's inviting us to let go of our everyday thinking and enter into this wonderful ocean state of a different state of consciousness where we can access ourselves beyond ego. And it's sitting there sending symbolic messages to our own ego so that it can let its guard down. So of course it's not logical. It's ego logic and desire logic. Imagine a conversation happening between the organ of the psyche that is desire and the organ of the psyche that is ego, and trying to convince it tell it exactly the right seductive story, that it's going to be allowed to let its guards down. So ego is concerned with, what does ego do? It gives us a sense of self. And a sense of self, it creates it, and it protects it vigilantly, like soldiers on a wall not letting anything in, right? Dragons on a wall, if you like. Guards. It won't let them, it doesn't like vulnerability at all, ever, ego. It's against it entirely. And it's amazing. We need a sense of self, or we cannot walk through the world. We don't even remember to lock our car door to protect it from somebody else taking it if we don't have a concept of self, because we don't know that there's a self to protect. And ego, I like to call it the three S's of ego, or the three guards of ego that the story needs to address. So imagine that there's this wonderful world over a bridge where you can be connected. You're not just focused on self. You're moved into we, and maybe even connection with we, another person or other people, or maybe even beyond that into connection with life itself. There's this wonderful land that's over there but you have to let go temporarily of your sense of self, or the guards around yourself, in order to get there. But on this bridge, there's three little guards, and they are self-identity, your status, and your self-worth, right? All of the self stuff that ego likes to defend enormously, right? So you can't get across to the bridge unless you somehow appease these three guards. You have to tell them, and desire, being a seductive siren of the ocean state of our unconscious, sings a song, tells a story that's going to appease each of those fears around our identity, our self-worth, and our status. So self-worth is how do I value myself? I am lovable because I'm so smart. I am lovable because I fit the gender stereotype that is sanctioned by society. I am lovable because I am manly. I am or pretty, or whatever it is that we get our self-worth from. And these are fine, but they can get in the way of trying to let go. The next one is self-identity. I'm a good girl. I don't be selfish. I can't focus on myself. I can't feel this pleasure. I need to be of service to somebody else. I'm a good boy. I can't be primal. I might hurt her. Right? I can't, and that's heterosexual examples, but clearly it can be any gender. But let me think of some more inclusive examples as well. But the next one is status, which is status is that the ego vigilantly defends is our power rank in society. Like, where do we sit in the hierarchy? We're below these people and above those people. Okay, this feels like a good comfort zone. This is where I am. I can't leave here. And it's a really primal state, because if we don't belong to society, our self is under threat, because we will die. We can't survive without other people. We can't get access to resources. We're not part of the tribe. We won't survive. So losing rank comes up. Ego gets hyper vigilant about defending that. in all sorts of subtle little ways. Like, did you just talk down to me? Do you think you're above me in rank? I need to pull you down a peg or two. Rah, 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 says ego, right? You made me lose my status, right? So these three S's come up in all sexual fantasies, all of them, romantic ones, smutty ones, all of them. And they must be navigated in order to let go, or you can't let go. So that's when I discovered that, sexual fantasies are the exact story, as I said, to allow us to be vulnerable, to let these guards down. But to do that, you have to include ego's fear. And I call that the poison. You have to actually include what it's scared of, what's blocking it from letting go in the actual story, and then also take really close notice of how the fantasy created a really clever antidote to that fear and triggered it so that they could let go. And oh my God, when I discovered how to do that in the divinery, I was talking to another dominatrix who's wonderful in Seattle. Her name's Catherine Control. We were talking about how you reach a certain point in the session where you've told the story through a lived experience, an embodied experience of their own psyche. You brought their psyche to life, and you get to the point where they drop. Just the bottom just drops out of them, and then they just open into this other state of being, and you can feel it viscerally, like the whole air in the room changes. They drop. Such a wonderful, powerful thing to do. But to do that, we took on the theatre of the inner world. We became the villain or the hero or the victim. We became the very things that ego feared the most, and then also included the antidote to that. And if you really deliberately hear that when you listen to a fantasy and embody it, then that's when everything clicks. So. Does that make sense to you? Am I going too geeky? Because I do geek out.
No, I mean, I haven't been there with like, I know that bottom dropping out. I haven't been there with sex or with fantasies, with this kind of stuff, but it's happened with psychedelics, which I know some people, for them, it's like you mentioned, or you've mentioned before, religion or spirituality. Like that's another vehicle. For me, it's been, using certain spiritual techniques with magic mushrooms or LSD or ayahuasca. And, there can be a bit of a struggle at first. I remember one time with mushrooms beside a river in Thailand, and the mind is like, no, 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 no. It's doing something, basically just a certain awareness practice. And at some point, something happened. I don't even know what it was, but I could just dropping in. Like, the drop is a really good word for, there's this sense of, I just drop into the center of my being, like infinitely deeper than whatever the mind is that's way up on the surface. I'm down at, like, the mind is these waves on the ocean. I'm like down in the Mariana Trench, like 10 or 12 kilometers beneath the surface. And there's just, yeah. So I've had that with psychedelics. So it's so interesting. So I know it exists. So it's interesting to then go, I've had that, but you can have that with music. I do jiu-jitsu at the moment, like certain sports practices, almost like a flow state. But it's interesting. It's really interesting to me to kind of, oh wow, like there's a way to do this with sexual fantasies, which is crazy.
Sexual fantasies are the exact map to get there if we know how to hear it. So this is, absolutely. Plant medicines. That's the other reason that my last name is Divine. Is the Divine is a nod to plant medicine, and everything that I learned from that as well. So this is not learnt entirely from sex work alone. It's informed by my experiences with ego dissolution through all sorts of different ways, and then